In this now, we turn to Guy Saint-Jacques, a former Canadian ambassador to China. Thanks so much for joining us. Right away, what can we expect from China, given that this is not the decision that they had pressed for, that they wanted from our courts?
Well, unfortunately, I think they will want to take immediate measures because in terms of timing, this is not the best timing. You may know that the Chinese Parliament, the National People's Congress, is sitting right now. In fact, they are concluding their work tomorrow. The leadership of Xi Jinping has been weakened recently because of the way that they have handled the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the situation in Xinjiang, now in Hong Kong. And therefore, he will want to be seen as being strong against Canada. And I think one of the first measures, unfortunately, that they will take will be to confirm that Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor will be judged. And that means it will be a lot more complicated for Canada to get them out, because they will say that we cannot ask them to interfere into a judicial process. Furthermore, I think there will be probably further measures that will be taken on the commercial front. We have already lost $4.5 billion in exports last year. For the first 3 months of this year, our exports are down 16%. I expect that there will be further problems coming down the road for Canada.
Is there anything we can do when we talk about the two Michaels? I mean, of course we worry about the economic strains in the relationship, but these are two men, two Canadian citizens who have been denied their freedom and their liberty. Is there anything that can be done on a diplomatic level, or is China just sort of dug in its heels on this one?
Well, it's I think on a bilateral basis, we have almost no leverage on China. We lost that when the idea of concluding a free trade agreement with them didn't materialize back in December 2017. And now the Chinese know that for all practical purposes, this is impossible. So that means that the only pressure that Canada can try to bring on China would be through allies. And so we have to continue to work with allies to raise at every opportunity the case of our two Canadians, but also to go back to President Trump to impress on him that we are in this mess because of the U.S. request to extradite Mrs. Meng, that he should do more to try to convince the Chinese to free them. They could do something that is, without being completely similar to the situation of Mrs. Meng in Vancouver, but they could release them on bail, and Ambassador Barton could host them on the diplomatic compound in Beijing. But I'm not convinced that President Trump will want to help Prime Minister Trudeau on this one.
Mentioning Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, when he's asked about this, he basically says, listen, in this country we have the rule of law, the courts make the decision independent of politics. Does China not understand that, or does China simply choose to ignore that? I think of the Global Times reacting to this, and of course, widely seen as just a voice of the Communist Party in China itself, basically saying that we're being bullied by the Americans, that our self-proclaimed judicial and diplomatic independence to U.S. bullying has been eroded. Are they choosing that stance, or do they truly not understand how our system works?
Well, I think they understand our system works, but it's a case where they want to have their cake and eat it too, because I recall when we went through a similar experience with Kevin Garrett when I was ambassador, they kept telling us, don't you know that China is a country governed by the rule of law? You cannot ask us to intervene into the legal process. But this being said, last year, Xi Jinping confirmed that the judiciary system in China is below the Communist Party, and the Communist Party will always be above the law. So when you have this attitude, he expects that it would be possible for Prime Minister Trudeau to pick up the phone, to call the judge, and get Mrs. Meng back to China. And so I think it's a case where they speak on both sides of their mouth to suit their purposes.
Now, obviously, this is a very tough time for the Canadian economy, for the global economy. Here is another pressure point. And you said earlier that you do expect them to ratchet up the pressure, not only on the two citizens that are being held, but on the economic levers they can pull. We've seen them attack canola before, beef and pork. This is the worst possible time. Again, does Ottawa have, and the Dominic Barton, I mean, the person in the job now, does he have any sway to sort of ward off the worst of the retaliation?
Well, we don't have much leverage, again, unfortunately, against China. I think that I would not expect them to cut the supply of medical equipment that we desperately need, because really that would be a low blow, and it would generate a lot of opprobrium on the international scene. And similarly, I don't think they will cut our pork export because they need this. They have lost too many pigs themselves. But there is a lot of the other things that they could do against us. And I think for the federal government, it's time to reassess the strategy. So far, it has been one of appeasement, not to do anything that would get China to react. But I would argue that we are past this time. We see that we have not, this strategy has produced no result. In fact, we are getting into what could be a process that could take years, and we better come to grasp with this, brace ourselves, and start to adopt a much firmer position, because this is the only language that China will understand.
Thank you for your time and for your insight today.
Thank you very much.
Guy Saint-Jacques is a former Canadian ambassador to China.